Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to discuss how you control recoil with your movement in FPS games. I'm going to show it in Apex Legends, then I'm going to highlight it in Apex Aim Trainer, then break it down further into Kovacs. Each step takes away something and will highlight your overall movement and work and how you can improve. Now in Apex, you know the recoil pattern of the alternator. Kind of jiggles back and forth, left and right, left and right, left and right. So the easiest way to counter this is obviously by doing an 80 spam jiggle. So essentially a jiggle. If you strafe to the left and move to the right, this will help require that your crosshair movement is as minimal as humanly possible. So obviously using the alternator with 80-80 spam will be helpful in the control of the random sway of the recoil. Now the issue is as you start to move and to take heavy note of, this will require less crosshair movement across the board. So this will affect your sensitivity settings. Also, do not use your movement to aim. This will make you predictable. So if you're facing an enemy and you're matching their strafing pattern exactly, then this will make you just as easy to shoot as you would be shooting them. So you want to incorporate your mouse movement in there as well. Use it only to control your recoil and benefit you, but also work to be unpredictable. And of course, this is where you see in Apex Legends, you see crouch span, people jumping, and so forth. So if you use your movement as crosshair movement, again, you're only aligning yourself for easier shots. Now, let us take away the game, and now we're going to go to the aim trainer side on Steam. You're going to want to practice this movement further to highlight the issue you have with your aim and adjust your sensitivity. So just to note, having a higher sensitivity can cause you to overshoot immensely as you 80-80 spam, or having too low of a sensitivity will cause excessive movement, which will then in turn result in overshooting or not shooting or aiming enough. You want to find the balance. I'll utilize again the alternator on screen like we did for the main game on Apex Legends. Alright, as we continue going onwards talking about recoil, obviously you can see the raw recoil here in the test range, and let me remove all these bots. If you were just to shoot, you can see the recoil jiggles left and right, just as we discussed before. Now, there's two ways you can practice your recoil control while you're moving. I'm going to showcase it in Kovacs in just a moment and break down those 4 different scenarios I'm going to provide to you, but I'm actually going to break this down in real time and how you can do this based on various distances. I'm going to do the training grounds similar to what we kind of had in the test range when we were showcasing at the beginning of the video. Obviously at that point you have the full elements. The reason why I'm going to bump this to 5 individuals to shoot at is because Apex Legends has a very crazy HUD of a lot going on. If you can get used to aiming with a lot of stuff right in front of you, then you're going to be a lot better. So we'll see how good my aim is while I'm talking through this. I'll only show a brief example. So if we start the scenario, like I showcased earlier, there's a lot of individuals in front of you. And all you want to do is just track these various individuals. Actually not doing half bad. And practice your even crouch spam as you're doing this. Another exercise that you're going to want to do as well is bring them a little further away and control the recoil of them when they're at the furthest distance. You can just have them doing a short strafe to get used to that small movement. I'm going to lower the number dramatically to 1 so you can focus on your recoil control at a distance. So if you see an individual at a distance like this, then you want to control that recoil. And right now, my recoil control is not fantastic. But obviously, as you warm up, you'll realize, okay, I'm overshooting. I need to keep my crosshairs a bit more stable. And even if you shoot again, you'll see the recoil pattern, on the wall over there. You see how it jiggles left and right. And as you jiggle left and right, while the enemy is doing the same thing, you'll figure out how to control your recoil. That was a much better spray. So there's 2 different ways, because this can be very daunting. It's like the start of the video that you saw, and these guys have 200 HP, so it's a lot of HP to practice on. You don't have to do this exactly. You can do this in Apex, the training grounds with an individual. This is just an example. I just want to remove various parts of the game to show you a further example of what this looks like and how you can practice this. Because even as I'm doing it, you can see like, oh, I need to work on this, I need to practice this and get used to it. Because this is probably the hardest distance that you're going to control most recoil. And the reason I'm highlighting the alternator is because quite literally it spams back and forth along the wall. So now let's head over to Kovacs and talk about some scenarios outside of recoil to get used to your movement and control. Alright, now that we're transitioning over to Kovacs, we're going to work through various scenarios and talk through what's going to help you improve your aim through 80-80 spam. There's quite a bit here. I'm going to focus more on tracking, but you can definitely focus as well on hitting individual targets. So what I've done, I've matched my sensitivity over from Apex Legends and also have an FOV here that matches my 1x FOV within Apex as well. So if we go directly into LGC3 Reborn, we click on that. This is a scenario, obviously, that you can start to practice and get used to your overall movement while tracking. Notice how this is more like, see how I'm doing 80-80 spam and it's scored on the bottom left with that score. This will help you get used to that tracking. Keep in mind this obviously has no recoil, so you can get used to the raw movement and realize how little you have to move around. You can also, you know, increase your field of view if you want to practice a hipfire version. I'm just showing an example of what it looks like zoomed in completely, as if this was Apex Legends with a 1x. This is a little hard to do while you're talking. I actually recommend, as an experiment, having a conversation, being in Discord as you practice, because this can be very difficult to do when you're actually talking, especially when you're having comms. This is atrocious. But nonetheless, this is a really great example. So I'm going to move on to the next example and talk through it. So if you want to practice full-on 360 movement, this is another great example of switching between targets. You can raise your FOV. I'm going to memorize what I had, which was 77. I'm going to move it up to 101, which would be my hip fire if somebody were to be around me, and switch between targets. So you can really see how you would switch to targets while you're doing an 80-80 movement spam, and this can be very helpful as well. And you have the score on the bottom left to make sure that you keep moving between targets. Right now, this is my hip fire FOV rather than my zoomed in, because you need to be able to see around you. Because if you can't see around you, then obviously it's going to be harder to hit. Keep in mind when your sensitivity, when you change FOV, it's still the same inches per 360. So now, let's move on to the next scenario to talk through it. Air dodge is fantastic to learn through. I'm going to leave my hip fire FOV here. But another great scenario when you're trying to, this is good. Just imagine this was a head that was moving around and you want to work on tracking this. This is easier said than done, because you have to realize that your mouse movement may not be as great as it needs to be. You don't have to move as much as you need to. If you're a low sense player, like I'm kind of low sense, 15.5 inches per 360 is not the highest, not the lowest. This can be a very helpful scenario. You can even see me not being warmed up, that my hand kind of jitters a little bit. So obviously smoothing it out and relaxing can make a big difference in terms of how much you're hitting your target. Now, if the pat target click dodge, I know I said I wasn't going to talk about tracking too much, but this is another great scenario. Hitting just individual targets 360 in front of you. There was another one I wanted to talk through as well, which was air dodge. This one has smaller, more refined movement, and you'll notice will kind of help you with those overshootings that is occurring. So the other one was obviously a lot larger movement, and you're going to realize with this one just how small your movements need to be. And this is a pretty fast motion as well. Still obviously things I need to work on here. It's a little harder to do while you're literally talking through it live, but nonetheless you get the concept. So if you're in Kovacs and you remove all the recoil and you notice, and even if I were to highlight things about my aim with this, in removing recoil out of the equation, my hand can be a little too jittery until I finally warm up. So once I warmed up and I smooth out my aim and relax a lot more, realize that the movement is not as great, even with this lowest sensitivity I have. So if you run a very, very high sensitivity, you will realize how little you have to move your mouse, especially if you're using your movement to kind of help track, which is not always a good thing. You need to make sure that you're also dodging the target. So with the scenarios I ran through, where this individual scenario where you're tracking something right in front of you, that's more of like an 80-80 spam, you're fighting somebody in 1v1, you have the target switching, so you're working on target or switching targets as you move around. You can do a point click scenario where you're clicking on individuals. You can do air dodge, which is also very, very important, kind of getting your X and Y full 360 movement as well. And finally air dodge, which is really, really refines that small movement. So if somebody's really in front of you spamming, and I'm going to give you one more actually just kind of think through. I don't see this in a whole lot of teaching. So Ground Plaza 8 is a fantastic example of the 80-80 movement spam that we're talking about. So if you look at this target, see how it, and you'll notice how fast you are inclined to overshoot. I changed my FOV on the fly, and this is more or less a 1x zoom in Apex Legends. So if you're trying to track it, realize that the movement you have to make is really not as large as you think. And this is, again, not as easy to do whenever you're talking, having a full-blown conversation, trying to explain everything that you see on screen. But nonetheless, you'll see that your movement that you have to do is not as big as you think. So if I were to raise my sensitivity dramatically, on this, even at 1.52, which is what I've used before, you'll realize how much more little, and you can do an 80-80 spam in that as well if you like. You don't have to, but just trying to give you an example of how little you really have to move your hand, but also how smooth the movement has to be, right? Again, I feel more comfortable at 1.32. So there is a lot to practice here and a lot to capitalize on and improve. So let's cut right back and kind of outro this video, and hopefully this is very helpful breaking this down. Again, you saw it in game, putting it all together. You take away a layer, and then you see the raw element in like Apex Aim Trainer. Then we take it even further and remove the recoil and see just how little you need to move your hand and how fluid the motion needs to be. Just as a reminder, Kovacs is really a gym. You really need the real thing, which is why I broke down 3 examples here. You're going to work yourself up and add more layers to keep it simple. So when you look at Kovacs, we did each scenario, this is the bare base, the foundation. Then you're going to go into Apex Aim Trainer, just as an example. You're adding the extra layer, but it isn't quite the game yet. Then you move yourself right into the game. You don't have to go through these steps. I'm just using this as a prime example of taking away a different layer so you can see the aim more. I obviously have a lot to improve on with my own aim, and it can be highlighted here in the videos even as you're watching it. So I hope you guys found this video helpful. If you did, be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe for more content. I aim to upload 4 videos a week, and I look forward to seeing you guys all in the next video.